Okay, I'm doing this more in my normal voice because I will say this. My thoughts on recent retired wrestling promoter Vince McMahon is this. First, let's get the fandom out the way. I can't say I was a huge fan growing up, and the reason I say this because I watched all kinds of wrestling when I was young. Honestly, I was more of a fan of a Jim Crockett or a Bill Watts or even a Fritz Von Erich style of wrestling. The presentation, rather, of it being an entertaining sport rather than sports entertainment. But Vince McMahon, you got to give credit where credit is due. He will go down in history as the most successful wrestling promoter ever, regardless of his tactics and regardless of the things he did and the way he did it. Nevertheless, he's going to go down at that, and it'll be a long time before we see a promoter even half that successful. That said, for people to ignore the reason why he retired, saying, oh, I'm 77 years old and this and that, you've probably read his statement, but to me, I'm like, nah, we know why you retired, dude. You retired because, let's be honest, the kitchen was getting too hot even for you. And I doubt very seriously he did it on his own. I wouldn't be surprised if the board, maybe even his family, Triple H and Steph, probably. I'm just speculating. I don't know this for a fact. I wouldn't be surprised if they urged him to retire. I wouldn't be surprised if the board said, look, this is going to get worse for us if you don't. So trust and believe. He's not doing it because he's too old to do it, even though one could argue this change should have happened years ago. I mean, he's been out of touch for a long time. Yeah, he'll have a good idea here and there that actually works. But most of his ideas, quite frankly, was out of date. Now, there's no denying his success. And there's no denying his vision. But to be honest, some of his biggest successes was actually from the help of other people. WrestleMania, the name was actually Howard Finkel's idea, because originally he wanted to call that event Hulkamania. And imagine how bad that would have went over, especially in 2016 when a certain videotape came out on one Hulk Hogan, but that's a whole other video. Or the Royal Rumble. He didn't even want the Royal Rumble. He hated the concept of the Royal Rumble. He thought it was stupid. But then Pat Patterson pitched it. They did a few house shows, and then they did it on USA Network, which premiered January of 1988. And it ended up being one of the favorite events on the WWE calendar, or back in the WWF days. So when we praise up Vince, or for people that want to praise up Vince, know this: he didn't do it by himself. And even if you catch him in one of his more humble moments, he'll even tell you he didn't do it by himself. He had a lot of help. In fact, some of his best ideas didn't even come from him. He took from other places. Never mind all the places he raided and promotions that he quote unquote, which granted they probably would have died anyway, but all the promotions that he raided and practically ruined. I mean, from Vern Gagne to Jim Crockett to Fritz Von Erich to Eddie Graham, to Don Owen out in Portland, Oregon. Let's just put it in perspective. And again, going back to why he's retiring. He's retiring because things are getting too hot. And let's just say this: regardless of why the change is happening, let's be glad. Thank him for all his contributions. And he did make more than a few good contributions. I would say he's made several, even. But let's not kid ourselves. If all these allegations and everything hadn't come up, he would still be there right now. Even though he should have been out years ago, if for no other reasons than business. And when I mean business, I mean specifically creative. Because let's be honest, he's been out of touch creative for years. But in this rant, basically what I'm expressing is I am expressing gratitude because he did provide some quality entertainment in periods. The golden age of the 80s and early 90s, the Attitude Era, the Ruthless Aggression Era. But with good comes the bad. You can respect the contributions of a Vince McMahon to the professional wrestling business. But at the end of the day, you also have to acknowledge the bad. I mean, that's part of his legacy too. It's just like with Chris Benoit. You can respect his in-ring contributions and the things he did in-ring and the matches he put on. Heck, I still watch a Chris Benoit match here and there. But at the end of the day, the guy killed his second wife and youngest son. You can't ignore that. And that's what I say on Vince McMahon. You can't ignore that he played hush money to women that he was the boss of, that they were subordinates to him. And forget the morality thing, because everybody knows him and Linda haven't been together for at least a decade, probably more. And he's probably been cheating on her way longer than that. But forget the morality. Just from a business standpoint, there's a myriad of problems. With that, there's a myriad of problems. With that, not to mention the boss subordinate dynamic. And people might say, well, they consented. It was consensual. She could have said no. Yeah, and she could have been unemployed too. So can you really call it consensual? And like I said, strictly business, that's a problem. That's a big problem. And further going on, not to mention all the sexual assault allegations. Yeah, I'm going to come out and say it. If YouTube gets me for it, fine. But I'm going to come out and use those words. I mean, you can't get around that. But regardless of where you stand concerning Vince McMahon, I'll acknowledge the bad and the problematic situations that he's put himself, not to mention his company in, but I'll acknowledge the good that he did too. Hopefully though, with Stephanie McMahon and Triple H involved in creative, hopefully going forward, we'll see a new direction within the next year or so. We'll actually see a better product in the next year or so. And that's my 2 cents on the whole Vince McMahon situation. I'm out.